Michael Donovan's weathered hands had worked the same fertile soil in Nebraska's Platte River Valley that his great-grandfather had claimed during the Homestead Act of 1862. His 180-acre farm, nestled between rolling hills and ancient cottonwoods, was once celebrated throughout the Midwest for its exceptional heirloom corn varieties and the peculiar limestone formation that had stood at its eastern boundary since before written history. Now at 58, Michael faced the bitter truth that he would likely be the last Donovan to till this land, with bankruptcy proceedings just weeks away and his final harvest already in the ground. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Donovan Heritage Farm had once been featured in agricultural magazines and Midwestern newspapers as a model of sustainable family farming and genetic preservation of rare corn varieties. But the last decade had brought a relentless series of catastrophes that had drained Michael's resources and crushed his spirits. He stood at his kitchen window, watching the early morning light spread across fields that would soon belong to someone else, most likely the corporate farming conglomerate that had been systematically acquiring struggling family farms throughout the county. Like so many family farms across America's heartland, the Donovan place had fallen victim to a perfect storm of calamities. 3 consecutive years of unpredictable weather patterns had devastated his crops. First drought, then flooding, then an early frost that killed half his harvest before it could mature. The medical bills from his late wife Karen's long battle with cancer had depleted their savings and forced him to take out a second mortgage. The massive farm equipment loans he'd secured during better years now haunted him with monthly payments he couldn't possibly meet. "Never thought it would end this way," Michael murmured to himself, pouring the last of his coffee into a mug that featured a faded logo from his farm's centennial celebration 15 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him. His great-grandfather Jonas Donovan had survived the Dust Bowl. His grandfather had weathered the farm crisis of the 1980s. But here he was, about to lose everything to forces that seemed both modern and ancient. Climate change, medical debt, and corporate consolidation. His phone rang, displaying his lawyer's number. Michael let it go to voicemail. There was nothing more to discuss. The bankruptcy filing was complete. The auction date was set for 3 weeks from now, and he had already begun the painful process of sorting through generations of family possessions, deciding what to keep and what to let go. The farm equipment would be sold first, followed by the land itself. The meager proceeds would barely cover his outstanding debts. What troubled Michael most wasn't his own fate. At his age, he could probably find work as a consultant or equipment operator for one of the corporate farms, but the knowledge that he had failed to preserve something precious. The Donovan farm wasn't just land. It was a living archive of agricultural heritage. His collection of heirloom corn varieties, some dating back to Native American cultivation before European settlement, represented genetic diversity that agribusiness had largely abandoned in favor of high-yield hybrid strains. His daughter Abigail, a brilliant plant geneticist working at a research station in Colorado, had encouraged him to donate his seed bank to a university agricultural program. At least that part of the legacy would survive, she had said during their last phone call, her voice cracking with emotion despite her scientific detachment. Michael had promised to consider it, but something in him resisted. These weren't just seeds. They were the physical embodiment of his family's relationship with this particular piece of earth. The limestone formation at the eastern edge of his property had its own special significance, known locally as Grandfather's Chair, due to its rough resemblance to a throne-like seat. The unusual rock outcropping had been a sacred site for the Pawnee people long before European settlers arrived. Michael's great-grandfather had promised the remaining Pawnee families that the formation would be protected, a promise each generation of Donovans had honored. Michael wondered what would happen when corporate owners took possession, whether they would preserve it or blast it away to make room for more productive acreage. After finishing his coffee, Michael pulled on his work boots and headed out to check on his final crop. 5 acres of a particular heirloom variety called Blue, Dakota, a deep blue-purple corn with a rich nutty flavor that had been the Donovan family's signature crop for generations. He had planted it more out of sentiment than practicality, knowing that the specialty market for such corn was limited and would do little to address his financial situation. Still, he couldn't bear the thought of not seeing those distinctive purple-blue stalks one last time. The morning was unusually cool for late August, with a heavy mist clinging to the low spots in the fields. Michael's boots left dark impressions in the dew-soaked grass as he walked the familiar path to the Blue Dakota plot. As he approached, something about the field caught his attention. The quality of light reflecting off the corn seemed different, somehow with an unusual shimmer visible through the morning mist. Drawing closer, Michael noticed that several stalks near the center of the field had fallen over, creating a rough, circular pattern about 15 feet in diameter. His first thought was raccoons or deer, though the damage pattern was unlike anything he'd seen from wildlife. Perhaps a small whirlwind had touched down overnight. He stepped carefully between the rows, making his way toward the circular depression. At the center of the flattened stalks, something gleamed dully in the strengthening morning light. At first, Michael thought it might be trash, perhaps a piece of metal debris blown by the wind or dropped by a passing plane. But as he knelt down for a closer look, he realized he was staring at something extraordinary. Partially embedded in the soil was an object about the size of a dinner plate, with a metallic surface unlike any material he recognized. It wasn't the dull gray of aluminum or the rusty brown of iron, but a strange, iridescent metal that seemed to shift colors as the angle of light changed, sometimes appearing copper-gold, sometimes with a bluish-silver sheen. The object was perfectly circular, with intricate patterns etched or embossed on its surface, concentric rings, strange angular symbols, and what appeared to be star-like points arranged in unfamiliar constellations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Michael reached out hesitantly, then pulled his hand back. What if it was dangerous? Radioactive material from a fallen satellite? Some kind of unexploded military ordnance? But curiosity overcame caution, and he gently touched the edge of the disc with one finger. It felt cool despite sitting in direct sunlight, and there was a slight vibration, almost imperceptible, like the hum of distant machinery. "What the hell are you?" he whispered, carefully brushing away soil to reveal more of the object. As he cleared the dirt, he discovered that the disc was actually the top portion of a cylindrical container. With increasing excitement, he dug around the edges with his pocket knife, gradually exposing a seamless, perfectly formed cylinder about 8 inches tall. It showed no signs of damage or wear despite being buried in the soil, and the material remained cool to the touch. When the object was fully excavated, Michael sat back on his heels, staring in wonder. In all his decades of farming this land, plowing, planting, harvesting, he'd never encountered anything remotely like this. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with a precision that seemed beyond conventional manufacturing techniques. There were no visible joints, welds, or fasteners, as if the entire thing had been cast as a single piece. After examining it for several minutes, Michael noticed a slight indentation on the top surface, a depression that perfectly fit the tip of his thumb. Without thinking, he pressed it. Immediately, a seam appeared around the circumference of the disc, and the top portion rose slightly with a soft hissing sound, as if breaking an airtight seal. Michael held his breath as he carefully lifted the top. Inside the container, nestled in a material that resembled dark velvet but had the resilience of foam rubber, was a smaller object, a sphere about the size of a baseball made of the same, color-shifting metal as the container. Like the larger object, its surface was covered with intricate patterns and symbols, but with one significant difference. Embedded within the metallic surface were what appeared to be gemstones in various colors, arranged in configurations that reminded Michael of star charts he had seen in astronomy books. The sight was so unexpected, so completely outside his experience, that Michael found himself laughing out loud in the middle of his failing cornfield. Whatever this was, an elaborate hoax, a piece of advanced technology, or something else entirely, it was undeniably valuable, if only as an art object. The craftsmanship alone would command a high price, not to mention the unusual metal and gemstones. For the first time in months, Michael felt a surge of hope. Could this strange discovery change his fortunes? At the very least, it might buy him some time to figure out an alternative to bankruptcy. He carefully replaced the sphere in its container, closed the lid, and tucked the object under his arm. As he stood up, he noticed something odd about the corn plants surrounding the spot where he'd found the object. They seemed more vibrant, their blue-purple color more intense than the plants in the rest of the field. Back at the farmhouse, Michael cleared a space on his kitchen table and set down the mysterious cylinder. In the clearer indoor light, the shifting colors of the metal were even more pronounced, creating an almost hypnotic effect as he turned. The object in his hands, the symbols etched into its surface, reminded him vaguely of ancient writing systems he'd seen in documentaries, part hieroglyphic, part mathematical, with repeating patterns that suggested a deliberate message rather than mere decoration. Michael's first instinct was to call Abigail. His daughter's scientific training might help make sense of the find, and her university connections could point him toward experts who might identify it. But something held him back. If this object was as valuable as his instinct suggested, he needed to proceed carefully. Once word got out, his quiet farm would be overrun with curiosity seekers, media, and possibly government officials. Instead, he called the one person in town he trusted implicitly, Dr. Eleanor Reeves, a retired archaeologist who had settled in the community after a distinguished career with the Smithsonian. Eleanor had become a friend after Karen's death, occasionally joining Michael for Sunday dinners and sharing her vast knowledge of history and ancient civilizations. "Eleanor, it's Michael Donovan. I found something on my farm that I think you should see today, if possible." He tried to keep his voice casual, but the excitement broke through. "Sounds intriguing," Eleanor replied. "Native artifacts. It wouldn't be the first time the plow turned up something interesting in that valley." "No, nothing like that. I can't really describe it over the phone. Could you come out to the farm this afternoon?" Eleanor arrived 3 hours later, her ancient Volvo raising a cloud of dust as it traveled down the long driveway to the farmhouse. At 72, she remained sharp and energetic, with keen blue eyes that missed nothing and hands that, despite encroaching arthritis, could still delicately extract fragile artifacts from archaeological sites around the world. "This better be good, Michael," she said as she climbed the porch steps. "I was in the middle of writing a scathing peer review." Her joking tone faded as she saw the intensity in Michael's expression. "What is it? What's happened?" Without speaking, Michael led her into the kitchen, where the cylinder still sat on the table, its metallic surface gleaming in the afternoon light. Eleanor stopped abruptly in the doorway, her hand rising to her throat. "My God!" she whispered. "Where did you find this?" "In my Blue Dakota cornfield this morning. It was partially buried in the center of a circular depression, like something had fallen from the sky." Eleanor approached the table slowly, her professional demeanor taking over. She pulled a pair of white cotton gloves from her purse, an archaeologist's habit, and carefully lifted the cylinder. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary," she murmured, turning the object in her gloved hands. "And this metal, I've never seen anything like it. The iridescence isn't a coating or patina. It seems to be an inherent property of the material itself." She studied the symbols with intense concentration. These markings combine elements from multiple ancient writing systems. I can see similarities to Sumerian cuneiform, early Chinese oracle bone script, and even motifs that resemble Indus Valley seals. But the combination is unique, and some symbols don't resemble anything in the archaeological record. Michael showed her how to open the container, and Eleanor gasped when she saw the sphere nestled inside. The precision engineering alone, creating an airtight seal with no visible locking mechanism, suggests a level of technological sophistication beyond conventional understanding. And these gemstones. She gently removed the sphere and held it up to the light. These aren't just decorative, they're positioned with incredible precision, and if I'm not mistaken. She rotated the sphere slowly, studying the arrangement. This appears to be a stellar configuration, but not one visible from Earth's perspective, at least not in the current epoch. Michael stared at her. "What are you saying, Eleanor?" She set the sphere down carefully. "I'm not saying anything definitive yet, but this object deserves serious, careful study by a team of experts." She fixed him with a stern look. "Michael, you understand this could be extraordinarily significant. Historically, scientifically, perhaps even beyond that. Could it be valuable?" Michael asked bluntly, his financial situation foremost in his mind, despite the wonder of the discovery. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Eleanor considered the question, understanding the subtext. Everyone in town knew about Michael's financial troubles, potentially priceless, depending on its provenance and composition. But that value could be compromised if this isn't handled properly. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I understand your situation, Michael, but rushing to sell this to the highest bidder might be a mistake. We need to establish its significance first." "I've got 3 weeks before the auction," Michael said quietly. "After that, this land belongs to Heartland Consolidated Agriculture, and anything found on it becomes their property." Eleanor nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Then we need to move quickly but correctly. I'll make some calls, discreet. Ones are to colleagues who can help authenticate and study this object without sensationalizing it or leaking information prematurely." That evening, after Eleanor had left with promises to return the next day with specialized equipment for preliminary analysis, Michael sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and purple. The mysterious cylinder sat on the small table beside him, its iridescent surface reflecting the changing colors of the evening light. For the first time in months, Michael felt something other than resignation and defeat. Whatever this object was, ancient artifact, elaborate art piece, or something else entirely, it had appeared in his field at precisely the moment when he had nothing left to lose. There was a strange poetry to that timing that wasn't lost on him. He thought about the generations of Donovans who had worked this land before him, each facing their own challenges and finding ways to persevere. His great-grandfather had arrived with nothing but determination and a handful of corn seeds carried from his homeland. His grandfather had innovated with irrigation techniques during the devastating droughts of the 1930s. His father had diversified their crops when corn prices collapsed in the 1980s. Now it was his turn to find a path forward, with this mysterious object potentially lighting the way. Michael lifted the cylinder, feeling its surprising lightness and the faint vibration that seemed to emanate from within. "What secrets are you hiding?" he whispered to the ancient-looking artifact. "And why did you appear in my field, of all places?" As darkness fell, Michael brought the object inside and secured it in the ancient floor safe hidden beneath the braided rug in his study. A safe installed by his grandfather during Prohibition to hide valuable papers and the occasional bottle of forbidden whiskey. For the first time since Karen's death, he slept soundly through the night, without the usual 3 a.m. wakefulness brought on by financial anxiety. The next morning, Eleanor returned as promised, accompanied by Dr. Sanjay Patel, a materials scientist from the State University whom she had sworn to secrecy. Dr. Patel brought portable analytical equipment that looked like something from a science fiction movie, a handheld spectrometer, a digital microscope that connected to his laptop, and several other devices that Michael couldn't identify. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Patel said after his initial examination. "The metal alloy doesn't match anything in our materials database. The closest comparison would be certain rare earth element combinations, but the crystalline structure is unlike anything I've encountered, and it exhibits properties that frankly shouldn't be possible. The thermal conductivity alone defies conventional understanding." Eleanor nodded, unsurprised. "And the gemstones?" "That's even more perplexing," Dr. Patel replied, adjusting his glasses. "They appear to be diamonds, sapphires, and rubies based on preliminary analysis, but their internal structure shows evidence of artificial arrangement at the molecular level, something beyond our current manufacturing capabilities." For the next several hours, the two experts documented every aspect of the mysterious objects while Michael watched in growing amazement. The more they discovered, the more unusual the artifacts proved to be. The metal responded to certain frequencies of light by emitting faint, measured pulses of its own. The gemstones, when exposed to ultraviolet light, revealed hidden patterns that corresponded to the symbols etched on the outer surfaces. By late afternoon, both Eleanor and Dr. Patel were convinced that the discovery warranted immediate attention from higher authorities in their respective fields. They composed careful emails to select colleagues, attaching only the most basic data and requesting absolute confidentiality. "I've contacted Dr. Elizabeth Morgan at the Institute for Advanced Archaeological Studies," Eleanor told Michael as they sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by scientific equipment and reams of preliminary data. "She's the foremost expert on anomalous artifacts and has connections to both private research foundations and governmental institutions. If anyone can help navigate this situation while protecting your interests, it's her. And I've reached out to Dr. Wei Zhang at Materials Innovation Laboratory," added Dr. Patel. "His team has clearance to work with classified advanced materials. He can provide analysis beyond what's possible with my portable equipment, while maintaining strict confidentiality." Michael appreciated their concern for his situation, but still worried about the ticking clock of the bankruptcy auction. "I understand this is scientifically significant, but I need to be practical. In 3 weeks, I lose everything: the farm, my home, my family's legacy. If this object can prevent that, I need to know soon." Eleanor and Dr. Patel exchanged glances. "Michael," Eleanor said gently, "based on just our preliminary findings, this discovery could be worth far more than your farm. But establishing its legitimacy and full value will take time and the right connections. Rushing to auction could result in it being dismissed as a hoax or acquired for far less than its true worth. Not to mention the scientific value," Dr. Patel added. "This alloy alone could advance materials science by decades, if not centuries. The applications are potentially revolutionary." That evening, after his visitors had departed with promises to return the following day with additional experts, Michael walked out to the Blue Dakota field where he had made the discovery. The circle of flattened corn had become more pronounced, with the surrounding plants now visibly taller and more vibrant than those in the rest of the field. The blue-purple kernels developing on these stalks appeared larger and more numerous. Kneeling at the edge of the circle, Michael examined one of the enhanced corn plants more closely. The accelerated growth was unmistakable. These plants looked like they were weeks ahead in their development cycle compared to the rest of the field. He picked one of the more mature ears and peeled back the husk. The kernels inside were the deepest blue he had ever seen in this variety, arranged in perfectly symmetrical rows, without the gaps or irregularities typical of even the best heirloom corn. "What in the world?" he murmured, turning the ear in his hands. The kernels appeared to be coated with a slight iridescence similar to the mysterious metal object, subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice, but unmistakable to someone who had spent a lifetime examining corn. Michael's mind raced with implications. Had the buried object somehow affected the surrounding plants? Was this evidence of some kind of advanced agricultural technology? He picked several more ears from different plants within and just outside the circle, intending to show them to Dr. Patel in the morning. Back at the house, Michael carefully washed one of the enhanced corn ears and broke off a small section. The kernels separated easily from the cob, another unusual characteristic for corn at this stage of development. After a moment's hesitation, he bit into a raw kernel. The flavor exploded in his mouth, intensely sweet with complex nutty undertones that the Blue Dakota was known for, but magnified tenfold. The texture was perfect, neither too starchy nor too watery. Michael sat at his kitchen table, contemplating this new development, while absent-mindedly eating more of the extraordinary corn. The mysterious metal object was significant enough on its own, but if it had somehow enhanced his heritage corn crop, the implications were staggering. Blue Dakota was already a specialty variety prized by high-end restaurants and food connoisseurs. A superior version with these characteristics could command premium prices in niche markets. For the first time since finding the object, Michael considered a possibility that hadn't occurred to him before. Perhaps the true value of his discovery wasn't in the artifact itself, but in what it might teach them about agricultural improvement. His farm might yet be saved, not by selling a mysterious artifact to a museum, but by developing an enhanced crop that could revolutionize heirloom corn production. These thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone. The caller ID showed Eleanor's number. "Michael," she said without preamble, her voice tense with excitement. "Dr. Morgan responded immediately to my email. She's flying in tomorrow with a small team, and she's bringing the director of the National Museum of Historical Technology, a representative from a major research foundation, and a private collector who specializes in anomalous artifacts. This is moving faster than I anticipated." "That's good news, right?" Michael asked, still processing the implications of the enhanced corn. "Potentially life-changing news," Eleanor replied. "Based on just the preliminary data we sent, they're prepared to discuss acquisition terms that could resolve your financial situation many times over. But Michael, once they arrive, events may move very quickly. You should be prepared." After hanging up, Michael sat in his darkening kitchen, the partially eaten ear of enhanced corn on the table before him and the weight of impending transformation heavy in the air. Tomorrow, experts would arrive who might explain the mysteries that had literally emerged from his field. Their judgments could determine not just the fate of his farm, but potentially his place in history. For a man who had expected to spend the day preparing for bankruptcy, the sudden reversal was almost too much to comprehend. Michael picked up the corn again, studying its perfect rows of iridescent blue kernels. Whatever happened next, nothing would be the same. For his land, for his legacy, or for himself. The last Donovan to farm this soil might yet have the most significant story to tell. As night fell over the Nebraska plains, Michael returned the mysterious cylinder to its hiding, placing the floor safe, along with samples of the enhanced corn. Then he walked out onto his porch and looked up at the stars, wondering if the answers to his questions might lie somewhere in those distant points of light, encoded in the strange stellar patterns embedded in the mysterious sphere. For the first time in years, Michael Donovan felt something he had almost forgotten, not just hope, but wonder. Tomorrow would bring experts with knowledge and resources beyond his experience, but tonight, under the vast Nebraska sky, he allowed himself to believe that his family's connection to this land might continue after all, though perhaps in ways his ancestors could never have imagined. "This better be good, Michael," she said as she climbed the porch steps. "I was in the middle of writing a scathing peer review." Her joking tone faded as she saw the intensity in Michael's expression. "What is it? What's happened?" Without speaking, Michael led her into the kitchen where the cylinder still sat on the table, its metallic surface gleaming in the afternoon light. Eleanor stopped abruptly in the doorway, her hand rising to her throat. "My God," she whispered. "Where did you find this?" "In my Blue Dakota cornfield this morning." It was partially buried in the center of a circular depression, like something had fallen from the sky. Eleanor approached the table slowly, her professional demeanor taking over. She pulled a pair of white cotton gloves from her purse, an archaeologist's habit, and carefully lifted the cylinder. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary," she murmured, turning the object in her gloved hands. "And this metal, I've never seen anything like it. The iridescence isn't a coating or patina. It seems to be an inherent property of the material itself." She studied the symbols with intense concentration. "These markings combine elements from multiple ancient writing systems. I can see similarities to Sumerian cuneiform, early Chinese oracle bone script, and even motifs that resemble Indus Valley seals. But the combination is unique, and some symbols don't resemble anything in the archaeological record." Michael showed her how to open the container, and Eleanor gasped when she saw the sphere nestled inside. The precision engineering alone, creating an airtight seal with no visible locking mechanism, suggests a level of technological sophistication beyond conventional understanding. And these gemstones. She gently removed the sphere and held it up to the light. These aren't just decorative, they're positioned with incredible precision, and if I'm not mistaken, she rotated the sphere slowly, studying the arrangement. This appears to be a stellar configuration, but not one visible from Earth's perspective, at least not in the current epoch. Michael stared at her. "What are you saying, Eleanor?" She set the sphere down carefully. "I'm not saying anything definitive yet, but this object deserves serious, careful study by a team of experts." She fixed him with a stern look. "Michael, you understand this could be extraordinarily significant, historically, scientifically, perhaps even beyond that." "Could it be valuable?" Michael asked bluntly, his financial situation foremost in his mind, despite the wonder of the discovery. Eleanor considered the question, understanding the subtext. Everyone in town knew about Michael's financial troubles. Potentially priceless, depending on its provenance and composition. But that value could be compromised if this isn't handled properly. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I understand your situation, Michael, but rushing to sell this to the highest bidder might be a mistake. We need to establish its significance first." "I've got 3 weeks before the auction," Michael said quietly. "After that, this land belongs to Heartland Consolidated Agriculture, and anything found on it becomes their property." Eleanor nodded. her expression thoughtful. Then we need to move quickly, but correctly. I'll make some calls, discreet ones, to colleagues who can help authenticate and study this object without sensationalizing it or leaking information prematurely. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect late summer day in Nebraska. Michael was already awake when the first rays of sunlight streamed through his bedroom window. He had slept fitfully, his dreams filled with strange symbols and shifting metal. Rising early, he made coffee and returned to the kitchen table where Eleanor's preliminary notes still lay scattered from the previous evening. Before she had left, they'd agreed on a strategy. Eleanor would contact a select group of experts who could evaluate the artifact's significance while maintaining strict confidentiality. No social media, no premature announcements, nothing that might attract unwanted attention or diminish the object's scientific or financial value before they understood what they were dealing with. As he waited for Eleanor to return with her specialist colleague, Michael decided to check on the Blue Dakota field again. The discovery had so overwhelmed him that he hadn't properly examined the surrounding area. Perhaps there were other objects, or clues he had missed in his excitement. The cornfield looked different in the morning light, the circle of flattened stalks now more pronounced, the surrounding plants standing tall and unusually vibrant. Moving closer, Michael noticed something he had overlooked the day before. The plants immediately surrounding the discovery site were not just more colorful, but structurally different. Thicker stalks, broader leaves, and developing ears that appeared far more advanced than they should be at this stage of the growing season. "That's impossible," Michael muttered, breaking off a leaf to examine it more closely. The leaf was thicker, with a waxy surface that gleamed slightly in the sunlight. The veins within the leaf formed unusual patterns that didn't match typical corn leaf structures he'd observed throughout his farming life. Moving inward toward the center of the circle, he noticed that the soil itself appeared different, darker, richer, with a subtle iridescence similar to the metal object he'd discovered. Kneeling, he scooped up a handful of this soil and let it sift through his fingers. It felt different too, lighter, more granular, almost silky. Michael stood, brushing dirt from his hands, and surveyed the circle with growing wonder. The pattern of effect seemed to radiate outward from where the object had been buried, gradually diminishing with distance. Whatever had happened here wasn't random. It was centered precisely on his discovery. Back at the farmhouse, Michael found Eleanor's Volvo already in the driveway, along with an unfamiliar SUV with university plates. Inside, Eleanor was setting up equipment on his kitchen table with a man Michael didn't recognize. Tall, Indian descent, perhaps in his early 50s, wearing khakis and a button-down shirt despite the summer heat. "Michael, this is Dr. Sanjay Patel," Eleanor introduced them. "Materials science specialist from the university. I've worked with him on several archaeological projects where we needed advanced analysis of unusual artifacts." "Pleasure to meet you," Dr. Patel said, shaking Michael's hand. "Dr. Reeves has shown me her preliminary photos. I must say, I'm intrigued by what I've seen so far." "Did you bring the object back down from upstairs?" Eleanor asked, noticing Michael's empty hands. "It's still in the safe," Michael replied, "but I found something else you both need to see first." He described the changes he'd observed in the cornfield and showed them the unusual leaf he'd collected. Dr. Patel examined the leaf with immediate interest. "Fascinating. The cellular structure appears to be significantly altered. This isn't a typical mutation or selective breeding result. It's as if the plant's very DNA has been rewritten according to some new template." That's not all," Michael said. "I think you need to see the site itself." The three made their way to the Blue Dakota field, where Dr. Patel's scientific detachment briefly faltered at the sight of the transformed circle of corn. "Extraordinary," he murmured, pulling out a tablet device and snapping photographs. "The pattern is too precise to be natural, and the gradient effect as it diminishes outward. It's almost like a deliberate demonstration. Dr. Patel moved methodically through the site, taking soil samples, examining plants at varying distances from the center, and occasionally consulting with Eleanor in low, urgent tones about their observations. Michael watched them work, struck by the contrast between Dr. Patel's scientific precision and his own intuitive, generational knowledge of this land. The soil composition is significantly altered, Dr. Patel announced, after conducting some preliminary tests with portable equipment. Increased mineral content, enhanced microbial activity, and some elements I can't readily identify without lab analysis. If I didn't know better, I'd say this soil has been deliberately engineered for optimal plant growth. Like terraforming, Eleanor suggested, her archaeological imagination connecting the dots, but on a micro scale. Exactly, Dr. Patel agreed, and with a precision that exceeds our current agricultural technology. He turned to Michael. Mr. Donovan, this is potentially as significant as the artifact itself. Whatever was buried here hasn't just been sitting passively in the soil, it's been actively transforming its environment. Michael thought of the subtle vibration he'd felt when handling the cylinder. Could it still be active? The object, I mean? It seemed to hum slightly when I touched it. Dr. Patel's eyebrows rose. A power source that remains operational. After being buried for an indeterminate period, that would be unprecedented. He glanced at Eleanor. We should examine the artifact immediately. Back at the house, Michael retrieved the cylinder from the floor safe. In the clear morning light, its iridescent surface seemed more alive, the colors shifting more dramatically as he placed it on the kitchen table. Dr. Patel approached it with the reverence of a scientist encountering something beyond his understanding, despite decades of research. "May I?" he asked, pulling on nitrile gloves. Michael nodded, and Dr. Patel carefully lifted the cylinder, his fingers exploring its seamless surface. The metallurgical properties alone are extraordinary. This doesn't match any known alloy. For the next 2 hours, Dr. Patel conducted non-invasive tests on the cylinder and its spherical contents, using specialized equipment he had brought from his university laboratory. Eleanor assisted, taking detailed notes and occasionally offering insights from her archaeological perspective. Michael watched, alternating between wonder at the object's mysteries and anxiety about how this discovery might impact his dire financial situation. Based on preliminary analysis, Dr. Patel finally announced, this object contains elements not found on the periodic table, or at least not in these configurations. The molecular structure suggests manipulation at an atomic level beyond our current technological capabilities. He looked up from his equipment, meeting Eleanor's gaze first, then Michael's. This is not just archaeologically significant. It represents a technological paradigm that could revolutionize materials science, energy systems, and possibly agriculture, given what we've observed in your field. Eleanor had been simultaneously conducting her own research on her laptop, cross-referencing the symbols on the artifact with archaeological databases. The iconography combines elements from multiple ancient civilizations, but with mathematical precision that suggests these aren't merely decorative. They could be instructions, coordinates, or some form of complex communication. So what are we talking about here? Michael asked bluntly. Ancient technology, something from elsewhere? He hesitated to say the word alien, though it hung unspoken in the air. Science requires evidence before making extraordinary claims, Dr. Patel said carefully. What we can say with certainty is that this object exhibits properties beyond our current understanding and manufacturing capabilities. Whether it represents a lost ancient technology or something else would require more extensive analysis. Eleanor closed her laptop decisively. What we need now is a secure facility with advanced equipment and a team of specialists from multiple disciplines. And we need it quickly, before Michael's deadline. She turned to her colleague. Sanjay, who do you know at the Advanced Materials Research Institute? Dr. Wei Zhang is the director, Dr. Patel replied. We collaborated on that anomalous meteorite analysis last year. He has the equipment and the discretion we need. Perfect, Eleanor nodded. And I'll contact Elizabeth Morgan at the Institute for Advanced Archaeological Studies. Between the two institutions, we should be able to assemble a qualified team that can work under appropriate confidentiality agreements. Michael listened to their plans with mixed emotions. The scientific significance of his discovery was becoming increasingly clear, but the practical implications for his immediate situation remained uncertain. And what about my farm? The auction is still scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Eleanor and Dr. Patel exchanged glances. Michael, Eleanor said gently, based on our preliminary findings, several institutions would likely be interested in acquiring this artifact. Museums, research foundations, possibly even governmental agencies. The financial compensation could potentially resolve your situation many times over. But Dr. Patel added, rushing this process would be a mistake. Proper authentication and documentation are essential to establish its full value and significance. We need to proceed methodically. Michael nodded, understanding their perspective, but still anxious about the ticking clock. I appreciate your expertise, but I need some assurance that I won't lose everything while waiting for science to take its course. Eleanor considered this, then pulled out her phone. Let me make one more call. To Harrison Ford. The actor? Michael asked, confused. Eleanor laughed. No, a different Harrison Ford. He's the curator of anomalous artifacts at the National Museum of Historical Technology. If anyone can expedite this process while maintaining scientific integrity, it's Harry. She stepped onto the porch to make the call. Dr. Patel continued his analysis while Eleanor was outside, focusing now on the soil and plant samples from the cornfield. The genetic modifications in these corn specimens are remarkable, he told. Michael, the DNA has been altered with a precision that surpasses our current capabilities in genetic engineering. It's as if someone designed an optimal version of your blue Dakota variety and then implemented those changes at the molecular level. Could these changes be permanent? Michael asked, thinking about the implications. Would the next generation of seeds carry these improvements? That's a fascinating question, Dr. Patel replied. We would need to grow out a test crop from these seeds to determine that. But if the changes are indeed heritable, you might be looking at a revolutionary advancement in agricultural genetics, one that doesn't rely on the typical GMO approaches that many consumers find concerning. This possibility sparked something in Michael, a new potential path he hadn't considered. If the object had somehow created an improved version of his heirloom corn variety, one that grew faster, produced more abundantly, and presumably maintained or enhanced its unique flavor characteristics, that alone might represent significant value. Blue Dakota was already a premium product sold to high-end restaurants and specialty food producers. An enhanced version could command even higher prices and possibly save his farm independently of the artifact's value. Eleanor returned from the porch, her expression animated. Harry's interested, very interested. He can be here tomorrow with a preliminary authentication team, and he mentioned that the museum has emergency acquisition funds for precisely this kind of situation, where significant artifacts might otherwise be lost to private collectors or foreign institutions. How emergency? Michael asked, his financial concerns foremost. He mentioned a preliminary holding payment that could potentially Address your immediate needs while full authentication proceeds, Eleanor replied carefully. But Michael, he was very clear. This would be a tentative arrangement, pending complete verification, not a final purchase. For the first time in months, Michael felt the tight knot of anxiety in his chest begin to loosen slightly. Between the potential value of the artifact itself and the possibilities presented by the enhanced corn, paths were opening that he couldn't have imagined yesterday morning. The farm that had been slipping through his fingers might yet remain in Donovan hands. That evening, after Eleanor and Dr. Patel had departed with promises to return the following day with the museum representative, Michael sat on his porch watching. The sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The cylinder sat beside him on a small table, its iridescent surface reflecting the changing colors of the evening sky. After the initial scientific examinations, he had reclaimed temporary possession of the object, feeling a strange sense of responsibility toward it. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Michael noticed something remarkable. The patterns of gemstones on the sphere inside the cylinder seemed to be faintly glowing, with particular stones brightening as specific. Stars became visible. The effect was subtle but unmistakable, creating an eerie resonance between the cosmic display overhead and the ancient-looking artifact beside him. "You're a star map," he whispered to the object, but showing what? A location, a time? The question hung in the night air, unanswered yet tantalizing. Michael thought about his great-grandfather Jonas, who had claimed this land when nothing grew here but prairie grass. How would he have reacted to this discovery? Jonas had been a practical man by all accounts, but also deeply spiritual in his own way, believing that land held memories and secrets if one knew how to listen. The corn plants rustled softly in the evening breeze, the leaves of the enhanced plants catching moonlight differently than their unaffected neighbors. Michael had worked this soil for over 4 decades, continuing a family tradition that stretched back generations. He had always thought of farming as a dialogue with the earth, giving and receiving in equal measure, reading the land's responses through the success or failure of each season's crops. Now it seemed the land had offered up something extraordinary, as if in answer to his desperation. He wondered what his daughter Abigail would make of all this. As a plant geneticist, she would be fascinated by the enhanced corn. It represented exactly the kind of genetic improvements her research aimed to achieve, but through conventional methods that took years of careful selection and crossing. Should he call her, involve her in what was unfolding, or wait until more was understood? The decision came easily. Abigail deserved to know, not just as a scientist who might contribute valuable insights, but as the next generation of Donovans, connected to this land. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. "Dad," Abigail answered, surprise evident in her voice. Their conversations had been infrequent and strained since Karen's death, both of them carrying their grief differently. "Is everything okay?" "Everything different," Michael replied, unsure how to begin. "Something's happened here, Abby. Something I can't really explain over the phone. How quickly could you get back to Nebraska?" "You're scaring me a little," she said. "Are you sick? Is it the farm?" "I'm fine. And the farm?" He paused, looking out over the darkened fields. "The farm isn't being auctioned yet, and it might not be, depending on how things develop with what I've found." "Found? Dad, what are you talking about?" Michael took a deep breath. "I discovered an object in the blue Dakota field yesterday morning. Something that doesn't make sense. Not to me, not to the archaeologist and materials scientist who examined it today. And it's doing something to the corn plants around where it was buried, changing them, improving them." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Dad, are you sure you're okay? This sounds crazy, I know," Michael finished for her. I wouldn't believe it either if I wasn't looking at it right now. But it's real, Abby. And tomorrow, a curator from the National Museum is flying in to examine it. That's how significant they think this might be. Another pause, then. I can catch a flight in the morning. I should be there by early afternoon. Relief flooded through Michael. Thank you. I could use your expertise on the plant changes. And maybe another Donovan perspective on what to do with this thing, whatever it is. Whatever it is, Abigail repeated softly. Dad, be careful, okay? Don't let anyone take advantage of your situation. I won't, he promised. But Abby, I think this might save the farm, and not just temporarily. After they hung up, Michael sat watching the stars for a long time, the cylinder beside him seeming to pulse gently in resonance with the celestial lights above. For the first time since Karen's diagnosis 3 years ago, he felt something like hope, not just the desperate clinging to what was slipping away, but a genuine opening toward new possibilities. Whatever this object was, ancient artifact, advanced technology, or something beyond current understanding, it had appeared in his field at precisely the moment when all seemed lost. There was a poetry to that timing that wasn't lost on Michael. Perhaps, as his great-grandfather might have said, the land remembers those who have cared for it. As midnight approached, Michael carefully returned the cylinder to the floor safe and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new experts, new questions, and perhaps the beginning of answers. For tonight, it was enough to know that the story of the Donovan farm might not be ending after all, but rather taking an unexpected turn toward a future he could not yet imagine. In the quiet darkness of the Nebraska night, the enhanced corn, plants continued their accelerated growth, reaching skyward with a vigor that defied conventional agricultural understanding. And deep within the floor safe, the mysterious cylinder hummed almost imperceptibly, its energies still radiating outward in ways that scientific instruments had only begun to detect. Morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Eleanor and Dr. Patel returned shortly after sunrise, bringing additional equipment and news that their respective colleagues were mobilizing resources faster than anticipated. By mid-morning, the farmhouse had been transformed into an impromptu research station, with laptops, specialized devices, and scientific paraphernalia covering every available surface. Dr. Morgan is flying in from Washington with Harrison Ford and a preliminary authentication team, Eleanor told Michael as she set up her laptop. They'll arrive around noon, and Dr. Zhang from the Advanced Materials Research Institute is sending a mobile laboratory, literally a lab in a truck, that should be here by early afternoon. Michael nodded, simultaneously impressed by the rapid response and anxious about the increasing activity. What about confidentiality? I can't have word. Getting out before we understand what we're dealing with. The vultures are already circling this farm. Eleanor placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Everyone involved has signed non-disclosure agreements. No data will be published or shared without your consent as the property owner and discoverer. Harrison was very clear about protecting your interests, not just legally, but financially. Around 11 o'clock, Michael spotted a dust cloud approaching along the rural road leading to his farm. Not the expected official vehicles, but a familiar pickup truck belonging to Jack Winters, his nearest neighbor, and the local representative for Heartland Consolidated Agriculture, the corporate entity that had been pressuring him to sell for years. "We've got company," Michael muttered to Eleanor, pointing toward the approaching vehicle, "and not the kind we want." Eleanor frowned. Someone must have noticed the increased activity. Small towns. Nothing stays secret for long. "Let me handle this," Michael said, heading outside to meet the unwelcome visitor before he could reach the house. Jack Winters stopped his truck at the end of the driveway, rolling down his window as Michael approached. In his late 40s, Jack had once been a family farmer himself before selling out to Heartland and taking a position as their local land acquisition specialist, a role that many in the community viewed as a betrayal. "Morning, Michael," Jack called with false joviality. "Noticed quite a bit of traffic out your way yesterday. Everything okay?" Michael maintained a neutral expression, conscious of the need for discretion. "Just some final assessments before the auction. University folks looking at soil samples, that sort of thing." Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. "Funny, those didn't look like agricultural extension vehicles, and I heard there was some archaeologist involved? Eleanor Reeves?" The small-town grapevine was working efficiently, as usual. Michael shrugged non-committally. "Eleanor's an old friend. She's been helping me document some of the historic aspects of the property. You know how these old homesteads have their stories." Sure, Jack nodded, clearly unsatisfied with the explanation. "Well, just wanted to check in. Heartland is still very interested in your property, Michael. If there's anything significant happening that might affect the auction, they'd want to be informed, as a courtesy." The implicit threat wasn't lost on Michael. Heartland had legal teams that could cause problems if they felt blindsided. "Nothing that changes our current arrangement, Jack. The auction proceeds as scheduled unless something unexpected happens." Jack studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right then, but if your situation changes, I'd appreciate a heads up before Heartland hears about it from someone else." He put his truck in gear, then paused. "And Michael, I know we've had our differences, but I really do hope something works out for you. This land deserves better than being carved up by corporate decision-makers who've never set foot on Nebraska soil." As Jack's truck disappeared down the rural road, Michael stood for a moment, processing the encounter. Jack's position was complicated. Both agent of the corporate interests threatening to absorb the Donovan farm and former family farmer who understood what was being lost. His warning was clear, though. Heartland was watching, and any significant developments would not go unnoticed. The interaction reinforced Michael's understanding of the delicate situation. Whatever unfolded with the mysterious artifact had to happen quickly and discreetly, before corporate interests could interfere or legal complications could arise. With bankruptcy looming, his position was vulnerable. Any misstep could result in losing control of both the discovery and his land. As Michael returned to the house, a sleek black SUV turned into his driveway, followed by a government-issue sedan. The cavalry, it seemed, had arrived. The vehicles parked neatly behind Eleanor's Volvo, and 4 people emerged, 2 men and 2 women, all dressed in business attire despite the August heat. The eldest of the group, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and horn-rimmed glasses, approached Michael with an extended hand. "Mr. Donovan, Harrison Ford, National Museum of Historical Technology. My colleagues call me Harry." His handshake was firm, his gaze direct and assessing. "Dr. Reeves speaks very highly of both you and your discovery." Michael nodded, suddenly aware of his worn jeans and faded work shirt. "Welcome to what's left of Donovan Heritage Farm. Thank you for coming so quickly." Ford gestured to his companions. "This is Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, from the Institute for Advanced Archaeological Studies, Dr. Wei Zhang, from the Advanced Materials Research Institute, and Ms. Valerie Chen, representing the Brentwood Foundation for Scientific Discovery." Michael shook hands with each visitor, noting their barely contained excitement beneath their professional demeanors. These weren't just scientists or bureaucrats. They were people who recognized they might be on the verge of something extraordinary. "Has anything new developed since our last communication with Dr. Reeves?" Ford asked as they walked toward the house. "The object seems to be affecting the surrounding corn plants," Michael explained. "Accelerating their growth, changing their structure. Dr. Patel is examining samples now." Ford's eyebrows rose. "Botanical effects weren't mentioned in the initial report. That adds an entirely new dimension to this investigation." Inside, introductions were made between the new arrivals and the scientists already at work. Michael watched as Eleanor and Dr. Patel quickly briefed their colleagues on their preliminary findings. The kitchen had transformed into a command center, with laptops, scientific equipment, and hastily drawn diagrams covering every surface. "May we see the object?" Dr. Morgan asked, her British accent clipped with anticipation. Michael retrieved the cylinder from the safe once again, placing it carefully on a special mat that Dr. Zhang had spread on the table. The newcomers gathered around, their expressions shifting from professional interest to undisguised wonder as they observed the iridescent metal and intricate symbols. "Extraordinary," Dr. Morgan breathed. "The precision of these inscriptions. And look at how the patterns interact with light from different angles. It's almost as if they're designed to be read in multiple dimensions." Dr. Zhang was focused on the material itself. This metal, the atomic structure must be incredible. The way it refracts light suggests a crystalline matrix unlike anything in our current metallurgical understanding. Ms. Chen, the Foundation representative, had been quietly observing both the object and the scientists' reactions. Now, she spoke directly to Michael. "Mr. Donovan, I understand your property is scheduled for auction in less than 3 weeks due to financial hardship. Is that correct?" Her directness caught Michael off guard. "Yes, unless something changes dramatically." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The Brentwood Foundation has a special fund dedicated to preserving significant discoveries that might otherwise be lost due to financial circumstances. We call it our Archimedes Initiative after the famous lost manuscripts. Based on what I'm seeing, your discovery would qualify for immediate consideration." Hope surged in Michael's chest. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means," Ms. Chen explained, "that we could offer a preliminary acquisition grant, essentially an advance against the eventual valuation of this discovery. This would provide immediate financial relief while giving our scientific partners time to properly study and authenticate the object." For the first time in years, Michael felt the crushing weight of impending bankruptcy lift slightly from his shoulders. And what would the Foundation expect in return? First rights of refusal on the eventual placement of the artifact? Appropriate. Attribution as the discoverer and your continued cooperation with the research team, Ms. Chen replied. "We don't seek ownership of the discovery, Mr. Donovan, only the opportunity to ensure it's properly studied and preserved for humanity's benefit." Before Michael could respond, Harrison Ford interjected. "The National Museum would, of course, be extremely interested in becoming the permanent home for this artifact, should it prove to be as significant as preliminary examinations suggest. Our acquisition funds are substantial, especially for objects of unprecedented historical or technological importance." Michael looked between the two representatives, suddenly aware that he was in the middle of an institutional bidding war that hadn't even officially begun. "I appreciate both offers, but before we discuss permanent arrangements, I'd like to understand exactly what I've found and what it's doing to my corn." Dr. Morgan nodded approvingly. "A wise approach, Mr. Donovan. Science first, negotiations later." "However," Eleanor added gently, "accepting the Foundation's preliminary grant wouldn't preclude any future arrangements. It would simply buy time for proper research and for you to consider all options without the pressure of imminent bankruptcy." Michael considered this. The financial lifeline was tempting, but he needed to be cautious. How soon could such an arrangement be formalized? And what kind of figures are we talking about? Ms. Chen opened her leather portfolio. "We could have preliminary paperwork drawn up by this evening. As for the amount, the Foundation's emergency preservation grants typically range from $250,000 to $1 million. Depending on the preliminary assessment of significance." The numbers made Michael's head spin. Even the lower figure would be enough to halt the bankruptcy proceedings and keep the farm operational for at least another year. The higher amount could potentially clear his debts entirely. "I propose we conduct our initial examinations, then discuss terms this evening," Harrison Ford suggested. "By then, we'll all have a better understanding of what we're dealing with." With that matter temporarily settled, the team organized into specialized groups. Dr. Zhang and Dr. Patel focused on the material composition of the artifact, setting up portable analytical equipment. Dr. Morgan and Eleanor worked on documenting and interpreting the symbols, while Harrison Ford coordinated communication with their respective institutions. Michael led Ms. Chen to the cornfield to examine the botanical effects. As they walked, she explained her background, not just as a foundation representative, but as a botanist specializing in crop resilience and food security. "What you're describing, accelerated growth, enhanced nutritional profiles, improved drought resistance, these are precisely the characteristics agricultural scientists have been trying to develop for decades," she explained. "If this object has somehow induced these changes without conventional genetic modification techniques, it could represent a paradigm shift in how we approach global food security challenges." The cornfield looked even more dramatically altered than it had that morning. The plants in the central circle now stood nearly 8 feet tall, far beyond normal height for this stage of the growing season. Their color had intensified to a deep indigo blue that almost seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight. "This is beyond remarkable," Ms. Chen murmured, carefully examining a corn plant at the edge of the affected area. "The cellular transformation is visible even to the naked eye. Look at how the vascular structure has been enhanced, how the leaf arrangement has been optimized for light capture. This isn't random mutation, it's deliberate improvement." She pulled out a small device from her pocket, a portable spectrometer, and began taking readings from various plants at different distances from the center. The nutritional density increases proportionally to proximity to where the object was found, she noted. Protein content, essential micronutrients, antioxidant compounds, all significantly elevated and in perfect balance. It's as if someone designed the ideal version of this corn variety and then made it real. Michael observed Ms. Chen's growing excitement, her professional detachment giving way to genuine wonder. "So it's not just pretty corn, it's superior corn. Mr. Donovan, superior doesn't begin to cover it," she replied, showing him the spectrometer readings. "Based on these preliminary measurements, this enhanced Blue Dakota could potentially address multiple nutritional deficiencies prevalent in developing nations. And if the seeds prove fertile, if these changes are heritable, you might be looking at a revolutionary advancement in heritage crop development." For the first time, Michael began to see beyond the immediate financial implications of his discovery. The Blue Dakota variety had been his family's legacy for generations, a unique corn developed through careful selection by his ancestors and preserved despite economic pressures to switch to commercial hybrids. If this enhanced version could be propagated, it might represent a more meaningful legacy than he had ever imagined. Could the Foundation help develop this corn, as well as study the artifact? He asked as they walked back to the farmhouse. "I'd want to ensure it's used ethically, not monopolized by corporate agriculture or priced beyond the reach of small farmers." Ms. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "The Brentwood Foundation has a robust agricultural initiative focused on food sovereignty and small farmer access to advanced crops. This would align perfectly with those goals. We could discuss a dual-track arrangement, one for the artifact itself and another for the agricultural applications." By the time they returned to the house, the research teams had made significant progress. The kitchen had been transformed into a high-tech laboratory, with equipment that seemed more appropriate for a space agency than a farmhouse. Dr. Zhang and Dr. Patel had constructed a makeshift clean room in what had once been Michael's dining room, using plastic sheeting and specialized air filters. "We've conducted preliminary compositional analysis," Dr. Zhang announced when everyone gathered for an update. "The results are unprecedented. The metal alloy contains elements that don't match any known combination on the periodic table. Some molecular structures appear to be artificially stabilized in ways that defy our current understanding of atomic bonds." Dr. Morgan followed with her findings on the symbols. "We've been cross-referencing these markings with every known writing system in human history. While there are tantalizing similarities to various ancient scripts, Sumerian, Proto-Elamite, early Chinese oracle bone inscriptions, the overall system is unique. What's particularly interesting is that certain sequences appear to be mathematical in nature, possibly depicting astronomical alignments or coordinates." Harrison Ford had been maintaining contact with their respective institutions. "The National Museum has authorized an emergency authentication team to be flown in tomorrow. They'll bring specialized equipment for more detailed analysis. In the meantime, Ms. Chen's foundation has prepared the preliminary documentation for the conservation grant as discussed." Michael felt overwhelmed by the rapid developments. In less than 48 hours, his desperate situation had transformed into something he couldn't have imagined. Scientists from prestigious institutions were setting up laboratory equipment in his kitchen. A major foundation was preparing to offer a financial lifeline that could save his farm, and his family's heirloom corn variety might possess qualities that could impact global agriculture. Most surprising, though, was his own changing perspective. The initial financial panic that had dominated his thinking was gradually being replaced by a deeper appreciation for the significance of what he had discovered. This wasn't just about saving his farm anymore, it was about being part of something potentially world-changing. As the day progressed into evening, more equipment arrived, some via courier, some delivered by university staff who had been sworn to secrecy. A generator was set up outside to handle the increased power demands of the scientific instruments. The farmhouse that had felt so empty since Karen's death now hummed with activity and purpose. Around sunset, Michael stepped outside for a moment of solitude, needing to process everything that was happening. The western sky was painted in brilliant oranges and pinks, silhouetting the old limestone formation at the eastern boundary of his property, grandfather's chair, the sacred site his family had protected for generations. He was startled from his reverie by the sound of tires on gravel. Turning, he saw Jack Winter's pickup truck approaching once again. This time, the Heartland representative wasn't alone. A sleek, silver luxury sedan followed behind him. Michael tensed, recognizing the second vehicle as belonging to Richard Harmon, Heartland's regional director. This wasn't a casual visit. It was a calculated move. Somehow, word of the increasing activity at the Donovan farm had reached corporate ears. Jack stepped out first, his expression uncomfortable. He was followed by Harmon, a trim man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place against the rural backdrop. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he approached Michael. "Mr. Donovan, I apologize for the unannounced visit. Jack mentioned some unusual activity at your property, and given our mutual interests, I thought a personal conversation might be in order." Harmon's voice was smooth, practiced, with the cadence of someone accustomed to negotiation. "I'm Richard Harmon, Regional Acquisition Director for Heartland." Michael shook the offered hand, keeping his expression neutral. "Mr. Harmon, this is unexpected. Indeed, almost as unexpected as a fleet of scientific vehicles and personnel descending on a farm scheduled for bankruptcy auction." Harmon's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened slightly. "May I ask what's happening?" "Here, as the primary interested party in your upcoming auction, Heartland has concerns about any developments that might affect the property's value or availability." Before Michael could respond, Harrison Ford emerged from the farmhouse, alerted by the new arrivals. He sized up the situation quickly and moved to Michael's side. "Mr. Donovan, Dr. Zhang needs your input on something. Who do we have here?" His tone was pleasant, but carried an unmistakable authority. Michael made brief introductions, watching as Harmon evaluated Ford with the calculating assessment of a predator sizing up potential competition. "The National Museum of Historical Technology," Harmon repeated, his eyebrows rising. "That's quite a prestigious institution to take an interest in a Nebraska farm. May I ask what brings you all the—" "Away from Washington, Dr. Ford." Ford's smile was diplomatically opaque. "Research interests, Mr. Harmon. The museum frequently partners with rural landowners on projects of potential historical significance." "I see." Harmon's gaze shifted between Michael and Ford. "And would these research interests potentially impact the scheduled auction of this property?" "As I mentioned to Mr. Donovan, Heartland has made significant preparations based on the current timeline." Michael felt a surge of confidence with Ford beside him. "There have been developments, Mr. Harmon. I'm exploring options that might make the auction unnecessary." Harmon's smile tightened. "Mr. Donovan, while I respect your desire to retain your family property, I should remind you that the bankruptcy proceedings are well advanced. Any attempt to delay or circumvent the court-ordered auction could result in additional legal complications that would benefit neither of us." The implied threat hung in the air. Michael had heard similar warnings throughout his financial struggles, veiled reminders of Heartland's legal resources and his own vulnerability. Ford stepped forward slightly. "Mr. Harmon, I understand your company's interest in this property. However, I should inform you that the National Museum has initiated formal proceedings to investigate a potential historical discovery of significant importance. Such proceedings typically include temporary protection orders regarding both the discovery site and surrounding property." Harmon's composed expression flickered momentarily. "A discovery? On this land? What kind of discovery would warrant federal involvement?" "That information is currently restricted to authorized personnel," Ford replied smoothly. "But I can assure you that all proper legal channels are being observed. Mr. Donovan and the bankruptcy court will be kept fully informed as the process unfolds." Michael watched this exchange with growing appreciation for Ford's tactical maneuvering. The museum representative was establishing boundaries without revealing any specifics about the artifact. Harmon wasn't easily dissuaded. Perhaps Heartland could assist with this investigation. As the likely future owner of this property, we have a vested interest in any significant discoveries. Our corporate resources could potentially expedite whatever research you're conducting." "A generous offer," Ford acknowledged. "But premature, given that the property's ownership remains with Mr. Donovan at present. Should your company successfully acquire the land in the future, we would certainly initiate appropriate discussions at that time." Frustration flashed across Harmon's features before his corporate mask slipped back into place. He turned to Michael. "Mr. Donovan, I respect your position, but I urge you to consider your legal obligations carefully. Heartland values this property and has invested considerable resources in preparation for the auction. We would be disappointed to see those plans disrupted." With that parting comment, delivered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, Harmon returned to his car. Jack Winters lingered briefly, giving Michael an unreadable look before following his boss. As the vehicles disappeared down the driveway, Ford turned to Michael. "Corporate agriculture, always so subtle with their methods." Michael chuckled despite the tension. That was Heartland being diplomatic. Usually they're more direct with their pressure tactics. They sensed something valuable, Ford observed. Corporations like that develop keen instincts for opportunity. We should accelerate our timeline, formalize the preliminary agreements tonight, and set up security for the property. Back inside, Michael briefed the team on the visit from Heartland executives. Eleanor and Dr. Morgan exchanged concerned glances. Corporate involvement could complicate matters significantly, Dr. Morgan noted. They have resources to challenge, research access, delay proceedings, even attempt to claim ownership rights based on pending property acquisition. Ms. Chen had been listening carefully. This reinforces the importance of establishing clear legal protection immediately. The Foundation can have conservation lawyers here by tomorrow morning to secure both the artifact and the enhanced crop varieties. The corn, Michael said suddenly. We need to harvest samples of the enhanced Blue Dakota immediately. If Heartland suspects there's something valuable, they might not wait for legal channels. Dr. Patel nodded in agreement. Agricultural espionage is unfortunately common. We should secure samples of both the plants and soil from different zones of effect, and perhaps increase security on the property overnight. Harrison Ford made several calls, and within an hour, 2 security specialists arrived from the university, graduate students in archaeology who moonlighted as site security for sensitive excavations. They would take shifts monitoring the property overnight, particularly the cornfield and farmhouse. As night fell, the team gathered in Michael's living room to review their findings and finalize next steps. Ms. Chen presented the preliminary grant agreement, a document offering an immediate payment of $500,000 to secure the artifact and enhanced crop varieties for scientific study, with provisions for additional compensation following complete authentication. This initial amount should be sufficient to halt the bankruptcy proceedings and provide operating capital for your farm, she explained. The Foundation would receive no ownership rights, only research access and first opportunity to negotiate future arrangements. Michael read through the document carefully. The terms were surprisingly favorable, far more so than any agreement he'd been offered during his financial struggles. There were no hidden clauses claiming ownership, no exploitation of his vulnerable position. It was, as presented, a genuine effort to preserve both the discovery and Michael's connection to his land. This seems almost too good to be true, he admitted, looking up from the papers. Eleanor smiled gently. Michael, what you've discovered is potentially priceless, both scientifically and historically. The Foundation isn't being generous. They're being strategic. Being associated with this discovery has value beyond money. Dr. Zhang nodded in agreement. In scientific circles, being the institution that supports groundbreaking research brings prestige, additional funding opportunities, and increased visibility. They're making an investment, not a charitable contribution. Michael appreciated their candor. Throughout his financial difficulties, he had grown accustomed to one-sided arrangements that capitalized on his desperation. This felt different, a partnership rather than an exploitation. Before I sign, Michael said, I want to ensure that my daughter Abigail is included in the research team for the agricultural applications. She's a plant geneticist, and this is her family heritage too. Ms. Chen nodded without hesitation. We'd welcome her expertise. In fact, having a family member with relevant scientific credentials strengthens both the research and the narrative. With that assurance, Michael signed the preliminary agreement. The weight that had been crushing him for years lifted perceptibly as he completed his signature. For the first time since Karen's diagnosis, the future held possibilities rather than just looming loss. The Foundation will wire the initial payment to your account by noon tomorrow, Ms. Chen confirmed. That should give you time to contact your bankruptcy attorney, and begin halting the auction proceedings." As the meeting concluded, the scientists returned to their various research stations throughout the house, eager to continue their work into the night. Michael stepped outside, onto his porch, needing a moment to process everything that had happened. The security specialists had established a perimeter, their presence reassuring, given Heartland's obvious interest. The night was clear, stars spreading across the Nebraska sky in breathtaking array. Michael found himself looking upward with new wonder, aware that the mysterious sphere contained patterns that might correspond to these very stars, patterns created by unknown hands for unknown purposes. He thought about his ancestors who had worked this land, his great-grandfather Jonas, claiming the homestead during America's westward expansion, his grandfather weathering the Dust Bowl by innovating with sustainable farming techniques, his father preserving heirloom varieties like Blue Dakota when industrial agriculture pushed toward homogenized crops. Each generation of Donovans had faced challenges that threatened their connection to this land. Each had found ways to adapt and persevere, often by recognizing value in what others overlooked. The Blue Dakota corn itself had been considered worthless by agricultural standards of the 1950s, too labor-intensive, too low-yielding compared to commercial hybrids. But his father had recognized its unique qualities and genetic heritage worth preserving. Now, in what had seemed like his moment of final defeat, Michael had discovered something that might not only save the farm, but potentially change humanity's understanding of agriculture, materials science, and perhaps even our place in the cosmic order. There was a poetry to that timing that wasn't lost on him, as if the land itself had offered up this miracle precisely when it was most needed. Eleanor joined him on the porch, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Penny for your thoughts," she said. Handing him one, Michael accepted the coffee gratefully. "Just thinking about my father and grandfather, how they'd react to all this. Scientists in the house, security guards in the fields, corporate executives sniffing around. They'd be proud," Eleanor said simply. "You're doing what they did, protecting something important, something valuable, even when easier paths were available." "I almost gave up," Michael admitted. "Before finding that object, I'd reached the point of acceptance, was making peace with losing everything." Eleanor nodded, understanding in her eyes. Sometimes we need to reach that point of surrender before the path forward reveals itself. There's wisdom in that cycle of apparent ending and new beginning. It's reflected in every farming season, every natural process. They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars and sipping coffee. Inside the house, some of the world's brightest scientific minds were working to understand an object that defied conventional explanation. In the fields beyond, crops were growing in ways that challenged agricultural science, and Michael Donovan, who had awakened yesterday believing he would be the last of his family to work this land, now stood at the threshold of a new chapter. Not just for himself, but potentially for human knowledge. "Tomorrow Abigail arrives," Michael said. "I can't wait to see her face when she sees what's happening to her great-grandfather's corn." Eleanor smiled. "Family connections matter. To the land, to knowledge, to the future. Whatever this object is, whoever created it, they understood the importance of passing wisdom forward through generations. Perhaps that's why it appeared in your field, of all places." As midnight approached, a soft humming sound drifted from inside the house, Dr. Zhang's specialized equipment detecting energy patterns from the artifact. Simultaneously, a gentle breeze stirred the enhanced corn plants, creating a whispering counterpoint that seemed almost conversational, as if ancient technology and living plants were engaged in a dialogue only they could understand. Michael, Realize that whatever happened next, whether the object proved to be ancient human technology, evidence of visitors from beyond Earth, or something even more extraordinary, his relationship with this land had been permanently transformed. The farm was no longer just soil and crops, buildings and equipment. It had become a nexus point where past and future, Earth and perhaps cosmos, converged in ways he was only beginning to comprehend. For a man who had been preparing to lose everything, this reversal of fortune might have seemed like mere lucky timing. But standing under the vast Nebraska sky, Michael sensed something more intentional at work, as if his family's generations of stewardship had been recognized and answered when hope seemed lost. "You know what my great-grandfather used to say," Michael said softly. "The land remembers those who care for it." Eleanor nodded. Indigenous cultures worldwide share similar beliefs. Perhaps there's more wisdom in that perspective than our modern minds have been willing to recognize. Inside the house, a sudden exclamation from Dr. Morgan drew their attention. They hurried back inside to find the archaeologist staring at her computer screen with an expression of astonishment. "I've cracked part of the symbolic language," she announced as the team gathered around. "These aren't just decorative patterns, they're a sophisticated writing system. And based on initial translations, this object is far more than an artifact. It's a deliberate gift." On her screen, the strange symbols from the cylinder had been partially matched with linguistic patterns, revealing fragments of meaning. "To those who nurture, when need is greatest." Transformation, a continuation. The implications hung in the air as everyone absorbed this development. The mysterious object hadn't simply been lost or abandoned in Michael's field. If Dr. Morgan's preliminary translation was correct, it had been intentionally placed. A technology designed to activate when discovered by someone with a specific relationship to the land. "A gift," Michael repeated, the word resonating with something deep within him. "But from whom? And why my farm?" "Those questions may take time to answer fully," Dr. Morgan replied. "But one thing seems increasingly clear. This technology wasn't lost. It was waiting to be found by the right person at the right time." As the night deepened, the scientists continued their work with renewed enthusiasm, each new discovery raising questions that challenged conventional understanding across multiple disciplines. Michael eventually retreated to his bedroom, physically exhausted but mentally electrified by the day's developments. Tomorrow would bring his daughter home, the Foundation's financial lifeline, increased security, and undoubtedly new revelations about the mysterious object. But tonight, for the first time in years, Michael Donovan slept peacefully, his dreams filled not with anxiety about the future, but with possibilities he had never dared to imagine. In the blue Dakota field outside, the enhanced corn continued, its accelerated growth under the starlight, reaching skyward with a vigor that seemed almost conscious, a living testament to transformation and renewal, mirroring the unexpected rebirth of hope on a farm that had stood at the edge of extinction. Just days before, dawn broke over the Donovan farm, with golden light spilling across fields that had transformed overnight. The enhanced blue Dakota corn now stood fully mature, a biological impossibility that defied everything Michael knew about agriculture. The plants nearest to the discovery site had developed full ears, with kernels of such deep sapphire blue they appeared almost luminous in the morning sun. Michael stood at the edge of his porch, coffee mug in hand, watching as the scientific team already bustled about the property. Dr. Patel and Ms. Chen were in the cornfield taking samples and measurements, their excitement visible even from a distance. Dr. Morgan and Eleanor had converted his living room into an impromptu translation center, walls now covered with printouts of the mysterious symbols and their potential interpretations. In the makeshift clean room, Dr. Zhang and his assistants worked with specialized equipment that hummed and beeped in rhythmic sequences. The farm that had felt so empty and defeated for years now pulsed with energy and purpose. Michael allowed himself a moment to absorb this reversal. How close he had come to losing everything, and how suddenly his world had been transformed by a single discovery in his field. His phone rang, jarring him from his reflection. It was Abigail. "Dad, I'm about 20 minutes out," she said, the sound of her rental car engine humming in the background. "What the hell is going on? There's a security checkpoint at the county road turnoff checking IDs." Michael smiled. Harrison Ford had been efficient in arranging protection for the site. "It's a long story, Abby, better told in person. They have your name on the approved list. You'll be waved through. And why exactly is the National Museum of Historical Technology involved? The guard mentioned them when I asked who authorized the checkpoint. All part of that long story," Michael replied. "Just prepare yourself for something extraordinary." When Abigail's car finally pulled into the driveway, Michael was waiting. At 32, his daughter had inherited her mother's analytical mind and her grandmother's determined chin. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes, the same deep blue as the enhanced corn, widened as she took in the collection of official vehicles and equipment surrounding the farmhouse. "Dad," she said as she stepped from the car, "what have you done?" Michael embraced her tightly, realizing how much he'd missed her presence. "I found something, Abby, something that's changing everything." He led her inside first, introducing her to the key members of the research team. Abigail, with her scientific background, quickly grasped the significance of what they were describing. She examined the artifact with professional curiosity, asking technical questions that impressed even Dr. Zhang. "The metallurgical properties are beyond anything in our current technological capabilities," she summarized, turning the cylinder carefully in her gloved hands. "And you found this in our field, just buried in the soil?" "That's not even the most remarkable part," Michael said. "I need to show you the corn." As they walked toward the Blue Dakota field, Michael briefed her on the financial developments. The CD Foundation's preliminary grant offer, the halting of bankruptcy proceedings, the potential for both scientific significance and agricultural revolution. Abigail listened intently, her expression cycling through disbelief, cautious hope, and finally wonder as they reached the edge of the transformed field. "This isn't possible," she whispered, stepping between rows of corn that now towered over. Her head, bearing fully formed ears months ahead of normal development cycle. She broke off a leaf, examining its structure with a scientist's precision. The cellular organization, the vascular efficiency, these are modifications we've theorized but haven't been able to achieve through conventional breeding or even advanced genetic engineering. Ms. Chen approached, carrying several ears of the enhanced corn. "Dr. Donovan, I presume. Your father mentioned you're a plant geneticist. We could use your expertise in analyzing these samples." Abigail nodded, still processing the scene before her. "I specialize in drought-resistant crop development for agricultural sustainability. This is exactly what we've been working toward, but achieved through means I can't even begin to comprehend. That's why the Foundation is proposing a dual research track," Ms. Chen explained. "One focused on the artifact itself, another on its agricultural applications. Your father insisted you be included in the research team." Tears welled unexpectedly in Abigail's eyes as she looked at Michael. "You remembered." Michael nodded, understanding her emotion. Years ago, before Karen's illness had strained their relationship, Abigail had shared her dream of developing a more sustainable version of the family's heirloom corn, one that could help small farmers compete with industrial agriculture while preserving genetic diversity. She had pursued plant genetics specifically to honor that family legacy. "This is your heritage too, Abby," he said simply. "Whatever happens next, the Donovans should be part of it." They spent the morning harvesting samples of the enhanced corn from various distances within the affected area, carefully documenting each specimen's location relative to where the artifact had been discovered. Abigail worked alongside Ms. Chen and Dr. Patel, her scientific training, allowing her to seamlessly integrate with the research team. Michael observed with pride how quickly his daughter established herself as a valuable contributor, offering insights about the Blue Dakota's genetic history that provided context for the changes they were documenting. This wasn't just about saving his farm anymore. It was about continuing a family legacy in ways he couldn't have imagined. By midday, the farm had become even busier. The promised mobile laboratory from the Advanced Materials Research Institute arrived, a customized semi-trailer equipped with state-of-the-art scientific instruments. Additional security personnel established a more formal perimeter, and specialized equipment was delivered by courier at regular intervals. Harrison Ford cornered Michael as he returned to the house for lunch. "We've received preliminary authorization from the Smithsonian's Board of Regents," he said, his expression animated with barely contained excitement. "Based on initial findings, they're prepared to offer formal acquisition terms for the artifact. 7 figures, Mr. Donovan, potentially 8 depending on final authentication." Michael absorbed this information with surprising calmness. A week ago, such news would have overwhelmed him, a financial salvation beyond his wildest hopes. Now, it felt like just one aspect of a much larger transformation unfolding around him. "And the Foundation's agricultural research proposal?" he asked, thinking of Abigail's involvement. "Ms. Chen has secured preliminary approval for that as well, a separate research grant focusing specifically on the enhanced corn variety. Your daughter would be offered a leading position in that initiative, with full academic credit and patent sharing for any developments." The museum representative studied Michael's measured reaction with interest. "You seem remarkably composed for someone who's just been offered potential millions and scientific immortality." Michael smiled slightly. "A week ago, I was preparing to lose everything, my home, my land, my family's legacy. Now I'm standing in the middle of a scientific revolution that started in my cornfield. It gives a man perspective." Ford nodded, thoughtfully. "Perspective indeed. In my 30 years with the museum, I've seen discoveries that challenged our understanding of history, technology, even human origins. But this—" He gestured toward the cylinder, now secured in a specialized containment unit. "This could rewrite multiple scientific disciplines simultaneously. And you found it while simply tending your crops, a perfect illustration of Louis Pasteur's observation that chance favors the prepared mind." "I don't know about prepared," Michael replied. "Desperate, maybe. When you're about to lose everything, you notice things you might otherwise miss." A commotion at the front of the house interrupted their conversation. Michael stepped onto the porch to see Jack Winter's truck arriving once again, but this time followed by 3 black SUVs with Heartland Consolidated Agriculture logos and a vehicle he recognized as belonging to Sheriff Davidson. "Looks like a corporate America has decided to escalate," Ford murmured, coming to stand beside Michael. Richard Harmon emerged from the lead corporate vehicle, accompanied by a woman in an expensive suit whom Michael didn't recognize. Sheriff Davidson approached alongside them, looking uncomfortable with his role in whatever was unfolding. "Mr. Donovan?" Harmon called, his voice carrying the practiced authority of corporate power. "We need to discuss the situation developing on this property." Michael descended the porch steps, conscious of the security personnel moving into position nearby and the scientists pausing their work to observe the confrontation. "Mr. Harmon, This is still private property. I don't recall inviting Hartland for a visit. This isn't a social call, Harmon replied. This is Sharon Matthews, Hartland's chief legal counsel, and I believe you know Sheriff Davidson. The sheriff nodded awkwardly. Michael, we've received concerning reports about unauthorized scientific activities, potential hazardous materials, and restricted access to public roadways surrounding your property, Matthews stated, her tone clipped and professional. As the primary stakeholder in your upcoming property auction and a corporate citizen concerned with community safety, Hartland has petitioned the county for an emergency inspection order. She handed Michael a document bearing official county stamps. This authorizes Sheriff Davidson to conduct an immediate inspection of your property to ensure compliance with agricultural zoning regulations and public safety ordinances. Michael skimmed the document, recognizing it as a heavy-handed intimidation tactic. Hartland had clearly pulled strings with county officials who depended on corporate tax revenue. Before he could respond, Harrison Ford stepped forward, extending his hand to the sheriff. Harrison Ford, National Museum of Historical Technology, Smithsonian Institution. This property is currently under federal protection as a site of significant scientific discovery. I believe these credentials supersede County Inspection Authority in this matter. He produced official-looking documentation with federal seals. Sheriff Davidson examined the papers, clearly relieved to have an excuse to back down from Hartland's pressure. These appear to be in order, he said, nodding to Michael. Federal jurisdiction takes precedence here. I'll note that in my report to the county. Matthew's expression tightened. Sheriff, the inspection order specifically addresses potential environmental and public safety concerns that fall under local jurisdiction regardless of federal interest. Actually, Ford interjected smoothly, under the National Historic Preservation Act and the Archaeological Resources Protection Act, when a site of potential national significance is under investigation by authorized federal institutions, local inspections must be coordinated through the designated federal authority, which in this case is the Smithsonian Institution. The standoff continued for several tense moments, with Matthews consulting quietly with Harmon, while Sheriff Davidson shifted uncomfortably between the opposing parties. Finally, the sheriff handed Ford's documents back to him. I'll report that federal authorities have assumed jurisdiction, he told Matthews. Any further inspection requests will need to go through proper interagency channels. Harmon's carefully maintained corporate facade cracked slightly, revealing the frustration beneath. Michael, you need to consider the long-term implications. Here, whatever's happening on this property, Hartland has the resources to properly develop and manage it. We're prepared to make a very generous offer, one that acknowledges any scientific discoveries while ensuring they're handled with appropriate corporate oversight. Michael felt a surge of indignation at Harmon's transparent attempt to assert control over something he didn't understand, but recognized as valuable. Mr. Harmon, I appreciate Hartland's interest, but the bankruptcy auction has been suspended pending new financial arrangements. This property isn't for sale. Every property has a price, Michael, Harmon replied, his tone hardening. And every financial arrangement can be challenged in court. Hartland has considerable resources for extended legal proceedings. The implied threat hung in the air. Michael had experienced Hartland's legal tactics before. The grinding pressure of paperwork, delays, and financial attrition that had broken other family farms in the region. Mr. Harmon, Ford said, stepping closer, I should inform you that as of this morning, the Smithsonian Institution has formally registered a petition for this site to be designated as a National Historic Landmark due to the significance of recent discoveries. Such designation would place severe restrictions on development rights, regardless of ownership. Additionally, the Brentwood Foundation has initiated proceedings for an agricultural conservation easement on portions of the property, containing unique crop specimens. He smiled pleasantly. Both processes involve considerable federal bureaucracy that could extend for years, during which time, I imagine, any attempted property development would be effectively stalled. It was a masterful counter-threat, delivered with institutional authority that even Heartland's legal team would struggle to overcome. Michael watched as Harmon and Matthews exchanged glances, recalculating their approach. "We should discuss this further in a less confrontational setting," Matthews finally said, handing Michael her business card. "Heartland remains interested in potential partnership opportunities that could benefit all parties. Please call when you're ready for a substantive conversation." As the corporate representatives and sheriff departed, Ford turned to Michael with a small smile. "Corporate bullying 101. Show up with legal counsel and local authorities, create the impression of inevitable conquest, then pivot to partnership when direct intimidation fails." Michael nodded, pocketing Matthew's card. "I've seen it before. Family farms across the county have fallen to similar tactics, but they've never faced the Smithsonian Institution before. Or the Brentwood Foundation," added Ms. Chen, who had joined them on the porch. "Our legal team specializes in protecting significant discoveries from corporate appropriation. This wouldn't be our first rodeo with aggressive agricultural conglomerates." The confrontation with Heartland had reinforced something Michael had been feeling since the discovery, that this wasn't just about his farm or even the mysterious artifact. It represented a choice between fundamentally different values: corporate exploitation versus scientific understanding, short-term profit versus long-term stewardship, private ownership versus human heritage. Abigail approached from the cornfield, having observed the confrontation from a distance. "Heartland's tactics never change," she said, the bitterness in her voice reflecting her own experiences with corporate agriculture. "But this time they've miscalculated. This isn't just about land or crops anymore. It's about something bigger than all of us." Throughout the afternoon, the research teams continued their work with increased urgency, aware that corporate interest meant their window of undisturbed investigation might be limited. Dr. Morgan made significant progress translating the symbols on the artifact, discovering what appeared to be mathematical sequences that mapped to astronomical cycles. Dr. Zhang's team identified energy patterns emanating from the cylinder that corresponded to the growth acceleration in the surrounding corn. Most exciting was Abigail and Ms. Chen's analysis of the enhanced corn's genetic structure. "The modifications are elegant," Abigail explained during an impromptu team meeting in the kitchen. "It's not crude genetic manipulation like commercial GMOs. It's more like advanced evolutionary editing, selecting for optimal expressions of traits already present in the Blue Dakota genome. The really remarkable aspect," Ms. Chen added, "is that these changes appear stable and heritable. Preliminary germination tests on seeds from the enhanced plants show consistent expression of the improved traits." Michael absorbed these developments with growing wonder. The corn his family had preserved for generations, often at significant economic cost, now represented potentially revolutionary agricultural advancement. What had seemed like stubborn sentimentality, his refusal to abandon heirloom varieties for more profitable commercial crops, had positioned him to participate in something that might change global food production. As evening approached, Harrison Ford received a call that prompted an impromptu gathering of the core research team. "I've just spoken with the Smithsonian's board chair and the National Science Foundation director," he announced. "Based on our preliminary findings, they're fast-tracking a joint research initiative with unprecedented funding and resources. Both institutions recognize that what we're dealing with here transcends conventional scientific categories." He turned to Michael. They've authorized me to present a formal acquisition offer for the artifact. $5 million with provisions for additional compensation should further authentication increase its assessed value. The figure momentarily stole Michael's breath. It was more than enough to clear his debts completely, modernize his farm operations, and secure his family's financial future for generations, Ford continued. Additionally, they propose establishing a permanent research station here on the Donovan farm, a facility dedicated to studying both the artifact and its agricultural effects, with you and Abigail as permanent consultants with full access rights. The Foundation would supplement this arrangement, Ms. Chen added, with a dedicated agricultural research grant focused specifically on developing applications for the enhanced Blue Dakota corn, with an emphasis on sustainable farming practices and food security initiatives. Abigail would be offered a leading position with the opportunity to build her own research team. Michael looked at his daughter, seeing in her expression the same mix of amazement and caution that he felt. "This is, overwhelming," he said, simply. "Yesterday I was preparing to lose everything. Today you're offering millions and a research center." Abigail placed her hand on his arm. "It's not just money, Dad. It's recognition of what this farm has always been. A place of preservation and stewardship. Great-grandfather saved these corn varieties when everyone said they were worthless. Grandfather protected the sacred site at the eastern boundary when developers wanted to bulldoze it. You maintained these traditions when economics said it was foolish." She gestured toward the cylinder, now glowing softly in its containment unit. "Maybe this thing, whatever it is, recognized that. Maybe it appeared here precisely because this land has been protected by people who valued something beyond immediate profit." Her words resonated with something Michael had been feeling since the discovery, that there was an intentionality to it, a rightness to the timing and location that defied mere coincidence. The theories emerging from Dr. Morgan's translations suggested the artifact might indeed have been placed deliberately, designed to activate under specific conditions when found by someone with a particular relationship to the land. "We should sleep on this decision," Michael said finally. "It's too important to rush." After the meeting dispersed, Michael and Abigail walked to the eastern boundary of the property, where the limestone formation known as Grandfather's Chair stood silhouetted against the sunset. This sacred site, once central to Pawnee ceremonies, had been protected by the Donovan family when neighboring farms had destroyed similar formations to maximize tillable acreage. "I used to come here with Mom when I was little," Abigail said as they approached the weathered stones. "She told me the Pawnee believed certain places were thin spots, where the visible world and the unseen world came close together." Michael nodded, remembering Karen's fascination with the spiritual histories of their land. "Your great-grandfather promised the remaining Pawnee families that this place would be protected. Every generation of Donovans has honored that promise." They sat on the natural stone bench that gave the formation its name, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Below them, lights from the farmhouse and research equipment created a hub of activity that looked strangely beautiful against the rural landscape. "What do you think we should do?" Michael asked his daughter, valuing her perspective not just as a scientist, but as the next generation of their family's connection to this land. Abigail considered the question seriously. The scientific significance is undeniable, whether this artifact is evidence of ancient advanced technology or something even more extraordinary. It deserves proper study. The museum and foundation seem to be offering terms that respect both the discovery and our family's connection to it. She paused, looking toward the Blue Dakota field where the enhanced corn now stood fully mature in the moonlight. "And the agricultural implications could be world-changing. If we can develop a sustainable, highly nutritious crop that doesn't require chemical inputs or patented seeds, that aligns perfectly with what this farm has always stood for. Michael nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. And Heartland, their legal threats aren't idle. They've crushed smaller farms with prolonged court battles. That's what makes the institutional partnership so valuable, Abigail replied. Heartland has resources, but they don't have the Smithsonian's authority or the Foundation's specialized legal team. And honestly, Dad, they don't have what matters most, the genuine connection to this land and what's been found here. As they sat in companionable silence, a gentle humming sound rose from the direction of the farmhouse, the artifact's energy signature becoming more pronounced as night deepened. Simultaneously, a subtle luminescence became visible in the blue. Dakota Field, the enhanced plants appearing to absorb and reflect moonlight with unusual intensity. It's responding to the stars, Abigail whispered, watching as the glow in the field pulsed in rhythm with the humming from the house. The artifact and the plants, they're synchronized somehow. The phenomenon reminded Michael of something Karen had once said about farming, that it was humanity's oldest conversation with the cosmos, a dialogue conducted through seeds and soil, sunlight and water. Perhaps this mysterious technology was simply advancing that conversation to a new level, creating a more direct communication between earth and sky. In that moment, the decision clarified in Michael's mind. "We accept their offers," he said, "but with one additional condition, that the research always remains open source, available to small farmers worldwide rather than locked behind corporate patents." Abigail smiled, squeezing his hand. "The anti-Heartland approach, I like it." "It's the Donovan approach," Michael corrected, honoring the past while looking toward the future. As if in confirmation, the humming from the farmhouse intensified, briefly, and the glow from the cornfield brightened. Whether coincidence or response, it felt like affirmation of their decision, a continuation of the dialogue between human stewardship and whatever intelligence had created the mysterious artifact. The next morning, Michael and Abigail formally accepted the offers from the museum and foundation, with the added stipulation about open-source research. Both institutions readily agreed, recognizing the ethical alignment with their own missions. Contracts were signed, financial arrangements initiated, and the bankruptcy proceedings officially terminated. By midday, the news had spread throughout the county. Neighbors drove slowly past the farm, curious about the security checkpoints and scientific equipment now visible from the road. Jack Winters stopped by, no longer representing Heartland's interests, but speaking as a former family farmer impressed by Michael's unexpected reversal of fortune. "You've done something remarkable here, Michael," he said as they stood on the porch. "Not just finding that thing, whatever it is, but standing your ground against Heartland. Most folks around here had written you off as another casualty of corporate agriculture. Now you're the talk of the county, the farmer who beat the system." Michael appreciated the perspective. "It's not just about beating the system, Jack. It's about finding a better way forward. For this land, for farming, maybe for a lot more than that." As Jack departed, a familiar truck turned into the driveway, Tom Running Deer, grandson of the last Pawnee elder who had extracted the promise from Michael's great-grandfather to protect the sacred stone formation. Michael hadn't seen Tom in months, though they had maintained a respectful friendship over the years. "Heard there was quite a commotion out here," Tom said as he climbed from his truck. "Thought I should check in, see if it had anything to do with grandfather's chair." Michael introduced Tom to Abigail, who had been a child when they last met, and briefly explained the discovery in the cornfield and the scientific interest it had generated. Tom listened attentively, his expression thoughtful rather than surprised. "You mind if I see this object that's causing all the excitement?" he asked. Inside, The research team watched with interest as Tom approached the containment unit housing the cylinder. He studied it silently for several minutes, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "My grandfather used to tell stories," he finally said, "about star people who left gifts in the earth long ago, gifts that would remain dormant until they were needed, until they were found by those who would use them wisely." He looked at Michael. The stories said certain families were chosen as guardians of these gifts, often without knowing what they protected. Dr. Morgan leaned forward, her archaeological interest piqued. "Did these stories mention specific locations or describe the gifts?" Tom shook his head. "Not in detail. Just that they were buried at places where the Earth's energies ran strong, and that they would be revealed when the time was right, when humanity faced great challenges and needed guidance." He gestured toward the cylinder. "I'm not saying this is one of those gifts from the old stories, but I am saying it's interesting that it appeared here, on land that's been protected by one family for generations, at precisely the moment when that protection was about to end." The perspective added yet another layer to the unfolding mystery, connecting indigenous wisdom to the scientific investigation in ways that expanded rather than contradicted each other. It reinforced Michael's growing sense that the discovery represented not just technological advancement, but a deeper form of communication between past and future, Earth and cosmos, human stewardship, and whatever intelligence had created the artifact. In the days that followed, the Donovan farm transformed from a struggling family operation on the brink of bankruptcy into a vibrant research center. Temporary structures were erected to house specialized equipment and visiting scientists. The enhanced blue Dakota corn was carefully harvested, with seeds preserved for controlled growing experiments. Security remained in place, but with a more welcoming approach to the local community, including educational outreach about the scientific work underway. Heartland Consolidated Agriculture maintained a watchful presence, occasionally sending legal representatives to inquire about developments. But with the financial arrangements secured and powerful institutions now protecting the site, their threats carried less weight. Their focus gradually shifted to partnership opportunities and collaborative research proposals, corporate speak for attempting to gain access to technology they couldn't simply acquire through financial pressure. 1 month after the discovery, on a perfect late September evening, Michael stood on his porch, watching researchers come and go from the newly constructed laboratory facilities. The bankruptcy auction that would have marked the end of his family's connection to this land was now a distant memory, replaced by a future he couldn't have imagined. Abigail joined him, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "The first growth trials are showing consistent results," she reported. "The enhanced traits are expressing reliably in the 2nd generation. Dr. Chen is calling it the most significant advancement in sustainable agriculture this century." Michael accepted the coffee gratefully. "And the artifacts? Any new insights?" Dr. Morgan's team believes they've decoded about 40% of the symbolic language now. It's definitely a communication system, part instruction manual, part philosophical text. The recurring themes translate roughly to concepts like regeneration, stewardship, harmony, and what they're calling cosmic agriculture, an approach to farming that aligns with celestial cycles and energy patterns. Michael smiled at the irony. "So this advanced technology is essentially telling us to farm more like our ancestors did, working with natural systems rather than trying to dominate them. With some significant upgrades," Abigail added. "But yes, the core philosophy seems to be about partnership rather than exploitation." She gestured toward the thriving research community that had sprung up around them. "Kind of like what's happening here, scientists from different disciplines working together, respecting traditional knowledge while advancing new understanding. As darkness fell completely, the familiar humming from the artifact intensified slightly, and the fields where the enhanced corn had grown began to emit a subtle luminescence, a phenomenon that now occurred regularly with nightfall. The research teams had documented this effect extensively, but had yet to fully explain it, beyond recognizing that it corresponded to specific stellar alignments. Tom Running Deer's grandfather might have understood this better than all our scientists combined, Michael observed, watching the gentle play of light across his fields. Gifts from the star people, revealed when needed most. Abigail nodded, her scientific mind comfortable with holding multiple perspectives simultaneously. However we understand it, as advanced technology, ancient wisdom, or something beyond our current categories, it appeared at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place. Michael thought about the generations of Donovans who had worked this land, preserving heirloom crops that commercial agriculture had abandoned, protecting sacred sites that developers would have destroyed, maintaining traditions that modern economics had deemed inefficient. What had sometimes seemed like stubborn attachment to outdated practices had in fact been preserving something precious, a relationship with the land that transcended mere ownership or production. "The land remembers those who care for it," he said softly, recalling his great-grandfather's words. "Maybe that's not just folk wisdom after all." As if in response, the humming intensified briefly, and the luminescence in the fields brightened. Whether coincidence or confirmation, it felt like the continuation of a conversation that had begun generations ago. A dialogue between human stewardship and cosmic intelligence that was only now being recognized by modern science. The bankruptcy that had threatened to end the Donovan family's connection to this land had instead become the catalyst for its transformation. The farm that had struggled against industrial agriculture's economic pressures had now become a center for reimagining agriculture itself, not by rejecting progress, but by reclaiming the wisdom inherent in traditional practices while embracing new understanding. And Michael Donovan, who had expected to be the last of his line to work this soil, now stood at the beginning of a new chapter. Not just for his family, but potentially for humanity's relationship with the earth that sustained it and the cosmos, that had perhaps been reaching out to us all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.